Hi everyone, I'm Marcy Marcusa, and this is Manitoba.
A fight broke out between four men on a bus around 12:30 a.m. The union says a man pulled out a gun and pointed it at a passenger. Then he moved toward the front of the bus and banged the gun on the safety shield and demanded to be let out.
He just went, I stopped the bus, I opened the door and I let him off, and I just prayed to God he didn't shoot me.
It was after work on Tuesday when Donna Gospodarchuk got on the number 18 at a bus stop on Graham Avenue. She says as she shuffled to the back of the bus, she heard someone talking loudly. Soon, she says, he turned his attention to her.
As I got closer, he looked at me and he's like, there's a snake around your neck. And he's like, you're going to die. Do you want to die?
Dan Lafleur was riding the bus with his 3- and 4-year-old grandsons on a Sunday afternoon when things took a turn. They were sitting toward the back of the bus when a man a few rows ahead got up to leave.
The assailant just lunged at him and stabbed him in the upper abdomen. He turned towards me and says, I've been stabbed.
That man was Raymond Wesley Hill. The 57-year-old made it off the bus and flagged down a passing police car before collapsing. He later died. Lafleur said there was no argument that led up to the attack.
A bus driver was shot with a pellet gun on Monday afternoon. Police say it happened after an argument with a young passenger.
What we're listening to are just some of the stories about Winnipeg Transit, ones that have made headlines in the last 5 years. After that last one from late October, where a bus driver was injured when he was shot with a pellet gun, the union sounded the alarm. The president of the Amalgamated Transit Union, who we're going to hear more from a little later and throughout the episode, said the rise in violence on city buses is pushing operators off the job. Within the month of October alone, 18 drivers resigned. So if it's felt like transit was getting a little less safe for some time now, we now have new reporting from CBC News and the Investigative Journalism Foundation that actually puts a number to the problem. As Cam McLean reports, it's more than just a feeling.
Violence on transit is up in cities across Canada, but in Winnipeg, it's way up, nearly tripling in less than a decade, and higher than any other city. A review of Statistics Canada's Uniform Crime Reporting data shows violence on buses or near transit stops rose 281% from 2016 to 2024. The average for the 8 large cities included in the analysis was 88%.
Well, it's upsetting and disturbing a little bit, but not all that much of a surprise.
Transit Union President Chris Scott says drivers have tracked rising violence on buses for years, with weapons increasingly being used in assaults. Using location data from the Winnipeg Police Service, CBC mapped out where each incident occurred. The vast majority concentrated in the downtown neighborhoods of South Portage and Portage Ellis. Councillor Janice Lukes chairs the Public Works Committee. She says the high number of incidents downtown reflects the broader social challenges facing central Winnipeg.
Sure, there's addictions all over the city, there's crime all over the city, but the concentration of it is in these areas. And this is reflective of what's going on our buses in these areas.
Data from Winnipeg Police showed the number of incidents peaked in 2023, with a slight decrease last year. Lukes attributes that drop in part to the city launching its community safety teams, with the focus on transit safety. But the union says numbers this year show the trend heading in the wrong direction.
They're showing us that the number of acts of violence are increasing to the point where they may even surpass this year the record set in 2023.
Winnipeg Transit writer Lucas Lambert says most daytime university routes feel safe, but that changes at night, particularly downtown.
It's more the safety coming off the bus that's the problem, in my opinion. So, yeah.
Like waiting at the bus stop?
Yeah, at the bus stops.
The city of Winnipeg took new steps this year to try to curb violence. Winnipeg Police announced in September they would begin patrolling buses in and out of uniform. The city has also stepped up fare enforcement. It says much of the safety concerns involve people who have not paid for the bus. Cameron McLean, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Safety is not the only thing on passengers' minds. The city's annual survey of riders shows an overall decline in people's satisfaction with the transit system. Respondents said that they would want to see improvements to reliability, frequency, safety, coverage, and cleanliness of public transit. Just 48% of people said they strongly agreed with the statement that Winnipeg is easy to get around by bus. It's also a sharp contrast to the 90% who said that Winnipeg is easy to get around by car. That public perception is something that the city needs to get ahead of, at least according to experts like Ahmed Al-Ghanidi. He's a professor with the School of Urban Planning at McGill University and a Canada Research Chair in Public Transport Planning and Operation, who also researches crime on transit systems, by the way. He says if the public's view of Winnipeg Transit doesn't change, the consequence is clear.
People are not going to use public transit. We want people to use public transit. We want public transit to be safe. It is an equity issue to make sure public transit is safe for everyone. If you don't own a vehicle, you don't have a choice. If you're a young person, if you're an old person, you need to use public transit, and we need to make public transit safe. But to make public transit safe, you need to focus on the root of the problem, of the crime that's happening.
So the city does have some of these new safety measures in place. There are the protective shields around drivers that were introduced in 2019. Those are getting upgraded. There are also safety patrols. There's police officers on transit. And as we heard, there's new fare enforcement measures. But do drivers feel safer? I sat down with the president of the Transit Drivers Union to find out. Chris Scott, president of Amalgamated Transit Union, Local 1505. What do you make of these numbers?
Well, unfortunately, they're not surprising and quite disturbing to know that we are the leader of the pack again for the wrong reason. Certainly indicates that our fight is far from over. We have had some successes in implementing some safety measures in recent years. The safety officers, the newest program with officers on the bus, our existing shields, which we're fighting to improve, but the battle is far from over.
Can we stay there for a moment? How are you fighting to improve the shields? What do you want them to be like?
Well, what we want to see is a full operator compartment enclosure. We want that from floor to ceiling, from the modesty panel behind the operator, all the way to the windshield. The shields that we have now, at the time they were implemented, served their purpose, and that was to prevent people coming up and sucker punching the operator. But now assailants are reaching around the shield, sometimes grabbing the steering wheel, which puts everybody at risk, both inside and outside the bus. So we want to fully enclose the operator to make sure they can stay focused on their responsibilities.
As a driver.
Yes. And unfortunately with that, we also don't want the violence to transition over to the public.
So let's talk about that, because you mentioned what's on the bus here, and that is the community safety officers that are there. The city launched that safety team in February last year, 2024. So by the numbers, there was a 9% drop in violent incidents in 2024 compared to 2023. So by the other numbers, it's 286 incidents, where before there had been 314. We have another clip from Councillor Lukes here, because she says she thinks this could be a sign the added security on buses is making a difference.
I know for sure from the data that's coming in from the transit safety team that they're making positive strides. So yeah, I would say that the 2024 decrease is due to that. I really look forward to see what happens with the fare enforcement and with the cops being on the bus. Like, I think we're going to see a dramatic change. The bus drivers now are telling us, yes, this is amazing, right? The fare enforcement, when it's happening at the various stations, they're telling me it's night and day.
So there's a few things there. There's a safety team, there's cops coming, there's the fare enforcement. What are your thoughts on what she said there about what is working and what could be working better from your point of view?
Well, we did see that drop in the number of acts of violence on the service when the safety team came into place, but that has we're now long past the honeymoon period on that. This year, we are on pace to break the record of violent incidents on the bus that was set in 2023. We do hope that the fare enforcement project and the officers on the bus cap this increase. Since those two projects this year have been implemented, we have seen a month-to-month reduction on the number of notifications that we get for violence on the bus. And the safety officers, part of their success is the preventative aspect that they do. They do some deterrent, but the majority of it is preventative aspects. And they get people that are suffering from either insecurities such as food or housing or addictions to resources that can help them. But there is the deterrent aspect, which they do to a degree, and the officers are obviously most responsible for.
As you heard, the FIPA from the Winnipeg Freedom of Information request from the Winnipeg Police shows downtown is where the majority of these violent incidents are happening. What do you hope to see improved to change that? And how did that sit with you when you heard that piece of data? Does that match with what you might have been hearing from drivers?
Well, we are aware that a majority of the incidents happen in the downtown area, and unfortunately, with that, the low-income areas of the city. That is part of the problem that we need to address. We need to think outside the box and get resources for people, such as housing. The low-income housing initiative that the province has started is a big step forward. The increased detention times, because no longer are we detaining people for just alcohol intoxication. A lot of these substances that people have unfortunately felt that they needed to cope with their situation last a lot longer. And when they're coming down from these highs, they're a danger to themselves as well as the public out there. So the increased attention for those cases, because they provide care and resources during that period, I think is going to be a big step to help get people cleaned off these substances, and then they can start into picking themselves up. It's unfortunate that this trend has escalated as a result of the pandemic. Our numbers clearly indicate that the pandemic has resulted in an increase in these acts of violence, because people that were getting by just fine, they lost their job because many businesses had to shut down. Perhaps they lost their residence.
So
and
I'm just going to interject.
So
your sense of it is that there's just that there was a renewed sense of maybe what people's lives, got more maybe desperate, maybe challenging, and that it's reflecting a population now that is also in some different points of crisis.
Yeah, that is correct. We want to work on the preventative aspect to stop these acts of violence from occurring in the first place, and getting people that would act out in these instances the resources they need. I think would be a big step. It's great to have deterrence to say, if you act out violently on transit, these are the consequences of it. But ultimately, I don't want a single one of my members assaulted or a single member of the riding public and witnessing or involved in an act of violence.
So you're looking at this through a bigger picture lens.
Yeah, we're a force too. We can't just focus on my members. We have to, and ultimately we need to care about the riding public and the system in general. Without the riding public, we don't have a service, and without a healthy transit system, the city suffers.
In the short term, just before you go this morning, and we have about a minute left here, but what is one thing that can be done in the short term, though, to make everybody safer on the bus right now? What's top of the list?
Well, everybody safer. I think it would have to be the continued vigilance of the safety officers and the police officers on the buses. I have heard from several people, both riding public and operators, that they see these people on the bus, they feel safer. And the plainclothes aspect of that police initiative is a big item, because the next best thing to having a cop on every bus is thinking that person sitting next to you may be an officer.
Well, that's it for this episode of This is Manitoba. If you like what you heard, please share it around. Maybe tell a friend. We post new episodes every week, and you can find them wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Marcy Marcusa. Thanks for listening.